Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. I know I've been gone a little while and only posting again in a fitful way every couple of months or so. It's mostly because I was trying to figure out some new approach or some project that could maybe hold my interest, provide a sustained attack of attention. And I thought about what I loved, and one of the things I love most is Persona 4 Golden. In fact, one of the first videos I ever did was a bit about Persona 4. And so I figured I wanted to do a series on Persona 4 Golden. I might as well jump in now. I'll explain a bit about the shape of the whole thing in a couple minutes, but for now, thanks for watching. I don't really know how to begin talking about Persona 4. It's become to me over the years something so replenished by revisiting that what comes to mind most immediately is just that reiterative, reverberative, hall of mirrors repeatability of it all. Through this introductory sequence, the structures of familiarity endemic to television are explicitly evoked. There's TVs within TVs, multiple articulations of the title, and one question is, why? Why would the game prioritize the theme of repetition and variation in its opening moments? On one hand, it gestures toward the symbolic amplitude of TV, the rerun pleasures of return viewings, part of the reason everyone loves TV, or the reason why those who love TV love it the way they do, is because it embodies and enacts routine happiness. You turn it on at a certain time and you'll see a certain show, without fail. It's something on which you can effortlessly, strainlessly count. And since so much of Persona 4 takes place around the television as a kind of literalized portal, it makes sense that the opening sequence would remind us of the bewitching circuitry of the television, which can so reliably, again and again, give us what we want, even when we can't admit it's what we want. On the other hand, Persona 4 is a game about adolescence, a period where you and your friends are all in the middle of figuring out who you are. In memory, for the rest of one's life, adolescence becomes an often revisited sight. Colloquially, one could say that they revisit their scenes or episodes from adolescence, that they replay moments from that period in the theater of their mind. So the idea of reiteration or rewatching or replaying has some resonance with the very psychological import of this time in the characters' lives. And, of course, Persona 4 Golden is a remake of the original Persona 4, a reincarnation of the game. As William Carlos Williams said in his great poem, The Orchestra, a theme is repeated, stressing a variant. It's different, but the same, like how the title is the same no matter how many times it appears on screen, but also maybe a different color, maybe coming into the screen at a different angle. So that's one thing that came to mind during the opening sequence. Something else that came to mind was the lyrics to the beautiful song original to the Golden Edition, Shadow World. I especially love those lines after the opening verse laments the elusiveness of truth and goes on to say, "The only truth that you can ever find isn't another. A soul that's got the same burning need to find out what's neath the cover-up. The one can't be without the true other, so let's get together, see what we can uncover." I'm really very moved by these lines, not least because they call to mind that great, powerful last stanza of Matthew Arnold's Dover Beach. He's basically, in the poem, overlooking the ocean and the shore while he's on vacation with his wife, a honeymoon, really. And he spends the whole beginning part of the poem thinking about how sad everything can be and how wasted and deathful the world is. How everything washes away into an illusion of some sort and there's nothing that can withstand the tide of loss, endlessly lapping the shore of life. Not even faith stands a chance, and the poet's lost his ability to believe in anything, almost. Anyway, after all that, he ends with this unbelievably beautiful stanza that goes, "Ah, love, let us be true to one another. For the world, which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, has really neither joy nor love nor light, nor certitude nor peace nor help for pain. And we're here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night." Now, let's appreciate that. That's great. That's amazing. I love that poem. And moreover, if you ask me, something fairly significant occurs in that last stanza. When he says, "Ah, love, let us be true to one another," he's advancing a radical argument in which we all live our modern lives, in which the story of Persona 4 Golden takes place. He's saying, I don't think there's such a thing as truth, objective truth, in this world. So the most to which I can aspire is to be true to another person, and to have them be true to me. This idea of being true to someone can mean just loyalty or fidelity, of course, being true to one's spouse, meaning, to be faithful, and maybe that's the only faith available to some in a world that otherwise seems to overturn or abandon the possibility of firmer objective reality or truth. But I also love the idea that to be true to someone is to possess for them, to them, the qualities of truth. In other words, I think Arnold is suggesting not only that they be true to one another, but that they be truth to one another, that they find truth in each other, someone who's got the same burning need. And not to ramble on too long on a tangent begun by the opening song, but the radical argument that's being made here is essentially the argument of modernity. In the wake of collapsing metaphysical arguments to hypostasize or centralize, instead, psychology. And of course, I bring this up because psychology is essential to Persona 4 Golden. In other words, man, I love this song, and it reminds me of a poem I also love, and there's almost nothing better than that. I also want to take this time to recommend a poem that's pretty right commentary and plain-spoken corrective, maybe, to the loftiness of Dover Beach, a poem by Anthony Hecht called Dover Bitch. Feel free to look that one up, but suffice to say that it's a grounding note that essentially argues against melancholy and says, hey, maybe instead of Matthew Arnold being so melancholy looking at the sea, he might have enjoyed his honeymoon with his wife a little bit more. Just saying. That's Anthony Hecht, by the way, saying, just saying. And one last thing I'll say here. Seriously, I love the song Shadow World. Last year, I went in for a medical procedure and had to go under anesthesia. And, of course, your mind goes to certain places. I'd never been under anesthesia before. I was thinking, what's it like? Is it a certain kind of oblivion? Is it going to resemble death? What if I'm allergic to anesthesia and I have no idea? What if going under won't just resemble death, but in my case, what if it is death itself? And I told the anesthesiologist, it's my first time undergoing anesthesia. And he said, oh, well, that's a coincidence. It's my first time administering anesthesia. He was in his mid-50s. This was clearly a tried-and-true, time-tested joke meant to make me feel comfortable, and in its Borscht Belt obviousness, it sort of worked. And, lying on the table, I really thought to myself, really, if this is it, if I die somehow, I lived a good life. I have no regrets. I'm ready for whatever the unknown within this experience may entail. And then I entered such a peaceful dark, I can't even describe it, except to say that in addition to a pervading warmth and deep peace, and I'm not lying, I literally heard the entirety of the song Shadow World from Persona 4 Golden. As if it were being played on speakers in the room, which, by the way, it for sure was not. The Borscht Belt anesthesiologist was more a fan of the Eagles than anything else, if what I heard before going under was any indication. But all to say, in some kind of beyond or mid-beyond, what came to me was Shadow World. As Harold Brodsky said at the end of his great story in an almost classical mode, make what use of this you like. So what are we talking about? Persona 4 Golden? You'll probably have noticed that I entered in the name Leonard Meldbath, by the way, a couple minutes ago, which for our purposes is basically my name. You may also notice that it's a rearrangement of the letters that make up the name Donald Barthelme, my number one literary hero. I publish fiction under that name, and playing a game like this can be, I think, a kind of fiction writing. I'll also confess that, Igor has always left me cold, and Margaret is only interesting to me in as much as she reminds me of that Gerard Manley Hopkins poem where he says to a girl named Margaret who's crying because she's newly aware that natural things, plants, animals, come to an end. He says, the reason you're crying is because now you know that's going to happen to you too. He says it's Margaret that you mourn for. Which, I suppose, is tentatively relevant in as much as Margaret and the other attendant characters in Persona make a study of and hazard a telling interest in mortal lives. Anyway, I should probably let you know exactly what I have in mind, since I think we're halfway through already, this first installment. You see, the initial focus on the television motif isn't accidental. It reveals a bit what I really intend for this series. I tend to think that one of the only ways to really understand something is to turn it around in your hand, and look at it again and again from a bunch of incrementally varied angles. It's like how one of Philip Roth's characters from The Ghostwriter described writing. He said, it's like this. I turn sentences around. That's my life. I write a sentence, and then I turn it around. Then I look at it, and I turn it around again. Then I have lunch. He goes on to talk about it a bit more in that vein. I recommend that book, The Ghostwriter, a great deal, by the way. It's so good, it was printed in its entirety in The New Yorker, across 2 issues. It shares that distinction with Donald Barthelme's first novel, Snow White, which was so good that it was printed in its entirety in 1 issue of The New Yorker. It took up the entire New Yorker, basically. That's how good Snow White was. Anyway, turning something around, spending time turning it around in that way, and letting each new approach illuminate the possibilities of adjacent considerations, dedicating yourself to an accumulative stay in some material, is really one way to enter it fully. It almost bears a resemblance to the psychoanalytic mode of just going in there 3 or 4 or 5 times a week and retelling certain stories again and again until something unlocks. So what's that have to do with television, you may ask? Well, with television you get the continual exposure, the pleasures and surprises of regularity. I mean, that within the normalcy and foundational steadiness of just tuning in at an expected time, seeing something of an expected length, the normalcy and foundational steadiness of that, you can then become open to any number of great surprises or unanticipated insights arising from under the surface. That's basically what I'd like to do here. I'd like this to be a sort of TV show version of an analysis of Persona 4 Golden. My intent is that every other day, I know, too ambitious, doomed to fail, every other day I'd like to upload around 20 minutes of the game as I play through it, around 20 minutes being about the length of like a television show without commercials. Of course, if anyone wants to pay me to do ad reads for them, I'll do that. I'll do commercials. And then the episodes will be like 30 minutes, maybe. And in each of these episodes, I'll be sort of exploring conceits and pursuing connotative digressions or associative arguments that might complement any number of other more normal, less loose analyses of the game. I hope that's something that interests you, or has any kind of appeal in any way. It's pretty psychoanalytic in nature, but my hope is that the structure of revisitation or incremental evolution will yield something fun or useful. Or, at the very least, at a certain point, I might receive the highest compliment possible. That people put on hours of my rambling to entertain their pets while they're out of the house. Or use it as a kind of white noise to fall asleep or something. Now that would be psychoanalytic. Back to Persona 4 Golden, one of the great insights of this game is that, though it nominally observes small-town life and all its thwarted desire and corruptions of confinement and all its cloistered superstitions and quaint comforts, the game also comments on worldlier matters. Case in point, a catalyzing early event from a few minutes ago is the scandal provoked by a love triangle between a politician, a singer, and a news anchor. Already, power in the form of the politician, entertainment in the form of the singer, and information or knowledge in the form of the news anchor are aligned as forces of fallibility, or fallenness. This is the case such that when Nanako, your cousin in the game and a representative of the wisdom of children, when Nanako is watching a newscast about all of this, her response is, "This is boring." We'll get to that in a couple minutes. So at this point, you've gotten in the car with Dojima and Nanako, you pulled into a gas station where you'll have a fateful encounter with a seemingly innocuous attendant, and, the attendant invites you to think about working with them, saying that your being a student is no hindrance. You shake hands and immediately feel dizzy, lightheaded, unwell. Your tether to the world is frayed at this point for reasons you won't quite be aware of yet. This idea of a stranger making an innocuous gesture that'll go on to have significant ramifications is a reflection of the influence murder mysteries had on the story of Persona 4. By the way, I'd highly recommend reading at least one book by the Japanese mystery writer Seishi Yokomizo. Maybe the Honjin Murders, if you have a chance. Yokomizu uses techniques like this all the time in a really expert way, and more importantly, he has just such a fluid tone, one that mixes care and precision when it comes to plot with a seemingly guileless, ambling voice. And I think Persona 4 can claim to possess that same mixture of calibration and roving ease. Like, for example, take this period now where you're free to walk up and down the street. There's nothing to find or do here outside acquainting yourself with the types who are loitering by the bus stop, outside shops, or that unfriendly-looking girl that you originally ran into at the station. You can save for the first time, so this stretch of unobjectified gameplay is instructive in a sense and lets you anticipate coming back here when you can enter these shops, purchase the products sold here, and maybe speak further to some of the locals. One of them says a line here that I love about how living in the country is a mix of convenience and inconvenience. It's happening right now. It's going to happen in a second. It's an escape from demands and pressures, but also a confinement with certain otherwise undistracted forces. Life in the country, in other words, kind of resembles other states of seeming calm and focus within which certain energies can take shape and confront you without impediment. I do love this road, though it also seems to be a bit of vamping. I mostly spend this time on the road thinking about the gas station attendant, and about one moment in particular where the attendant's condescending line to Nanako is said about how to know her left from her right, and it elicits her chagrin. It's a reminder again that she's wiser than people think she is, smarter than people assume. It's a reminder of one of the Persona series' great central tenets, which is also a central tenet of psychoanalysis, that children are people too, and their rich inner lives and zones of awareness should merit respect, rather than derision and infantilization. It's also a reminder of another core aspect of the Persona series, that how other people see us, how they treat us, is leagues away from who we are in fact. When our real selves go unrecognized or obscured by the person other people might have us be, what's occurring is a kind of faithlessness. The other person in question here is forcing some identity onto us. They're not being true to us. So we get to Dojima's house, where he paused for a minute before going inside with the family, and I like lingering on this moment. There's almost a tacit recognition on the protagonist's part that this place will hold great significance, sort of prescient acknowledgement of what's to come. I think the notion of home is important to the game too, of course. Over the course of a playthrough, you'll become so familiar with the sliding sounds of the door, the padding around the kitchen floor, the release of suctioned air as you open the fridge. The banal beats of domestic life fortify your sense of ownership of this home, ownership of your experience here, your sense of really being part of the family. You sit down for this dinner where Dojima welcomes you with wide open arms, and it's clear that hard-nosed detective though he may be, he's not at all a cruel or bitter man. He loves you and communicates that love by sympathizing with your circumstances. He sees it must be tough to be left alone in a new and small town because your parents have gone off to work overseas. Already, by the way, we can see some differentiation come into view. You're not your parents. They're off working somewhere far away. You're living, growing, right here, in a small, unglamorous country town. The fact that you're being free from the orbit of your parents means that you can build a new identity out of chosen associations, rather than given blueprints. I also have to say here early on that I've always been touched by the range of dialogue options with which you're presented as you get to know Nanako and Dojima. As you've seen, I usually opt for a combination of propriety when it comes to Dojima and mutually dignifying plain-spokenness when it comes to Nanako. I find that usually children appreciate clear questions and statements and an emphasis on the practical. It also, of course, breaks my heart a bit just how much Nanako's had to grow up since the loss of her mother, and the way in which she assumes adult responsibilities to complete the household that Dojima can only imperfectly prop up on his own. Again, we're being trained here to pay attention to the quotidian as a key to the cosmic, the miniature unlocking the major. In just a moment or so after Dojima leaves, Nanako goes to turn back to the TV and puts on the weather. Our first indication that climate won't just act as a pathetic fallacy, but will activate kind of narrative portals into the story and into the characters. Weather, too, by the way, is something significant because of its ordinariness. As Leonard Michael says in his novella Sylvia, it's the ordinary things that are important, and they're important because they're repeated. Anyway, here's where we see how she reacts to the news about the scandal, the love affair between politician, performer, and broadcaster. The perfidy of the worldly people. Where do they all belong? As mentioned before, I love how she's simply bored by this. Not incensed, not frightened, not tantalized or threatened, just bored. So she changes the channel and savors the pleasures of a jingle for the goods store, Junez. The pleasures of a commercial, which of course lend themselves to repetition. It may even be said that Nanako maybe savors the repeatable pleasures in life as structuring devices, reminders of what remains present, which of course has something to do with how she manages the loss of her mother, how she defends against a sense of precariousness. Well, this may as well be as good a cutoff point as any, so I'll end things here for now and ask you to tune in day after tomorrow for more. Thanks for watching.
This is boring.
At Juness, every day is Customer Appreciation Day. Come see for yourself and get in touch with our products. Every day's great at your Juness.
Every day's great at your Juness. Aren't you going to eat?